Hey, hi guys. Great to be back here and super excited to be talking. I see some familiar faces as well. Thanks, Ayush, for having me here and letting me talk about some of the things that I learned, mistakes that we made during our early stage journey. So, Ayush talked a little bit of introduction about myself. Um, I was born in a small town called Purulia, which is on border of Bihar and Bengal. Uh, Stayed there for 10 years and then moved to Calcutta. Stayed there for about 5 7 years and then went out. Did my engineering from IIT Kharagpur, 2013 background, batch pass out. So my family was a Marwari family. So nobody in my family actually did a job. Everyone runs like a small boutique shop or something like that. So like I was one of the first ones in my family to actually go out and do engineering. So always was kind of passionate about building something of our own. Luckily, I got placed at Flipkart, and that was 2013. So Flipkart was growing drastically at that point in time, and I was fortunate to be part of the marketplace team there, which I just founded out and was in extremely early stage. So roughly about 40 people in that team, and during my 2 years we went on to scale from 1000 orders in marketplace to almost about a million odd orders, and the team size grew from 40 people to about, I don't know, like 4000 odd people. And a lot of people who joined with me at Flipkart um, actually went on to start a lot of the companies on their own. So I think a lot of entrepreneurial values around starting up, taking risks, being resourceful, hustling, all of those things I learned from a lot of the mentors that I had opportunity to work with at Flipkart and applied those things at Payment. So we started Payment roughly about mid 2015, ran it till about mid 2021, and then eventually we were acquired by a company called Teles International. It's a New York listed. So that's a little bit about myself. Um, and what I really wanted to do, Ayush told me to talk a little bit about growth and retention and things like that. I think what I really wanted to focus on is some of the uncertainties that come up, and how to kind of think about the foundation that we build that will actually enable us to scale. So it's not just about like doing five things that help you to scale, but it's more like if you have the right foundation in place, then scaling becomes a lot more easy and effective, and you can do it like faster. So I really wanted to focus a little bit about like some of the pitfalls that we made in our early days, and I often see founders going through similar things. So I thought I'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll also touch a little bit about all things around acquisition. Why do you need, like, why should you consider it, when should you consider it, and if you've decided, how should you go about it. So I think like acquisition is one of the less spoken things in general, but I wanted to kind of touch upon some of the things that I discovered as I was going through the process myself. So with that, let's jump right in. So first thing first, as we now that like everyone who started off has dreams of making a really large company. So let's talk about what is it that you need to do, what should be your approach, what is it that you should be thinking about as you enter your startup phase and that entire journey till you achieve product market fit. So I think like any time that is spent not dreaming or building or selling is distraction. Now, so people often talk about building and selling, but I think it's equally important to dream. And like, startups are hard. It's not easy. Like, you're going to face so many rejections, you're going to face so many like, the highs are extremely highs, the lows are extremely lows. I'm sure you guys recognize that. But I think one thing that helps you stay on course is you dream about what kind of world you want to live in, and how do you kind of nurture the world to actually move in that direction. So I think you're only limited by your imagination. My background, when I did my engineering in agriculture and food, uh, because that was the only branch that I was getting in one of the IITs. But from there, we made a shift from that to like building software that helps machine learning engineers solve some of the most difficult problems of our generation, including self-driving cars. So I think one of the things that helped me do that is just by dreaming that, like like I'll be able to do it. And of course, as a founder, when you dream, you actually take your your teammates in that journey as well. So just think big. If you think just like whatever you are thinking, just think like, can I do 10x of that? So that is first step that I think is very, very important. Second part is building. So I think the way to approach about building in initial stages is like, the idea of like the job of founder is to be able to de-risk um, uh, the probability of failure in early stages. So the way to do that, and this is something that we used to do a lot, is like, build a hypothesis that you want to test and try, and figure out the cheapest way to prove it. So let's say you want to prove that you you are a, let's say, you're trying to build a model that helps detect weeds amongst the crops. So your single job is like, first of all, like, is it even possible? Can I have the right data through which I can practically differentiate that or not? Like, just take like a smallest step of that entire cogwheel of the dream that you are dreaming, and build an hypothesis and find out a cheapest way to kind of prove it. And then assess, like, if you are able to do this, and build on top of that, zoom out and see if there's an opportunity to build $100 million business around that. So that is something that we used as a means to think about building. And third is selling. So you're dreaming, you build out a hypothesis. Now you have to get feedback from the customer, and there's no better way to get feedback by in if you're not talking to the customer. But I think when you're selling, people often confuse velocity of sales, or let's say, how fast are they closing, how big value they are closing, etc. I think as much as it is about that, it is also about uh, understanding the problem deeply, the problem that you're trying to address, and the value proposition that you bring onto the table. And this forms a very, very critical part as you think about scaling, because you as a founder, you are able to do a lot more context switching and deliberation while you are hearing the problem from the customer. But in order to for 10 other salespeople to do it, like, you need to be able to clearly articulate the problem statement and the value proposition that you provide to the end customer. And one of the frameworks that I happened to get a chance to learn from Jyoti Bansal himself, founder of Harness and previously App Dynamics, is he instills this in a very, very clear way. Like, there are three things that you need to answer: why buy now, and why buy from you. So whenever you are thinking about your sales process, any sales meeting that you are having, or any customer conversation you are having, just try and articulate whatever you are learned in in this format, of why buy now and why buy from you, and then iterate from there. And that is why it's very critical for founder to do this initial selling himself or herself. And lastly, like, I think, needless to say, nothing beats the power of hustle and relentlessness. So I'll share a quick story about how I ended up meeting Jyoti Bansal and actually getting to know about this framework. So me and my co-founder AJ, we were in San Francisco attending SASTER, and there was a talk from Jyoti Bansal, and we were just sitting on like second row around that, and we'd been trying to reach Jyoti Bansal for a really long time, but we just not able to get him and talk to him. So right after the call, we just like went to the stage and jump over to the stage and went backstage and just stopped him and told him about how we have come from India with this dream of building software for self-driving cars, and we really need, we have no one to kind of get mentorship from, and we need his help to be able to do that. It took us couple of more follow-ups from that, but we ended up getting some time and actually discovering this framework from himself. So I think that is where, like, as a founder, you need to create opportunities. You need to have a relentless pursuit of the dream that you are pursuing, and then work iteratively towards that. Cool. Second thing, um, as you are in early stages, one of the common mistakes that people founders end up doing is like closing all deals possible. But one of the things that I learned is like not all dollars are green. So choosing right customers in your early stage can actually make or break your journey. So like as much as the customers are choosing you, you are also choosing your customer. And the reason why it is important is because your early customers are going to be like the early adopters who are going to give you the feedback. So you may end up spending like lots and lots of time with them, and if the if you are able to receive right feedback and right help, right amount of time, then essentially you will be able to iterate a lot more faster, and then also look at it from a lot more holistic point of view. And this is very essential as you prepare yourself towards growth and figure out your PMF journey. So few now, how do you understand whether you are targeting the right customer or not? So one of the things that I define is something called a startup affinity of that particular customer. So some of the leading indicators could be that, is your POC spending time with you? Is your POC actually telling about their problem and not just saying that, yeah, we are looking to take a decision and this is what timelines are, etc., etc. There are 5 other vendors that we are talking to, but are they really telling you about like what problems are their engineers facing? What is the end business problem that he or she is trying to solve? Do you understand what is his or her promotion dependent on? Like what can you do or your product do today that will help that person, your POC, your champion, to become successful in their career? So these are some of the leading indicators that you can assess for yourself and understand, are they making, if they're making any unreasonable asks, you can directly ask them that, have they ever purchased any piece of software from early stage startups or not? uh, Another question is like, ask for pilot payment. Now it may be a small amount, that's fine, but some dollars on the table is always a sign of how serious they are when they are trying to engage with you. And lastly, referenceability is extremely important. So is this champion going to vouch for you when you go out and raise funds, your series A, series B, etc.? Are they going to actively go out and talk to your investors and give you ref checks? The investors are going to call them and going to ask them like, how critical is this product for you? Anything that is not, that does not say that, I'm going to die if this particular product doesn't exist, is is not a strong yes. And if it is not a strong yes, it's just a strong no. That's it. So I think this I often see that founders do not think about referenceability early in their stages, but this becomes extremely important as far as your fundraise is concerned, other customers are concerned, future leadership employees are concerned. So that becomes very, very critical. um, Building case studies, marketable collaterals become extremely important, because that help you define your credibility amongst all the people that you're trying to sell to. So I would say, like, figuring out the right customer segment, figuring out whether in that particular segment this is the customer who is known for startup affinity, and if you are going to convert them into referenceable customer, are going to be extremely important indicators as you look to choose your early customers. Third, I think in early stages, you are not in a business of customer acquisition, rather you are in business of customer retention. And customer delight should be central to all sorts of strategy and tactics um, that you think about. So there's a reason why SaaS enterprise business, B2B SaaS enterprise business, whether it is ML native or its traditional SaaS, etc., is powerful. It's primarily because of its compounding nature, its predictable revenue forecasts. Uh, like companies today, of course, given the market concern, market parameters, etc., are anyways valued between 10x, 15x, 20x, 50x. Hot companies which are growing very, very fast may even end up being valued at higher than that. So it's just because they are able to create predictable revenue forecast, and the way that happens is if you are able to retain the customers and grow within them. And the leading indicator to be able to do that is what probably is called as NPS, or is customer likely to kind of uh, promote your product and service and engagement to other customers. I'll give you an example of our early days at Playment. So there's this company that we work with. It's called Neuro. What it does is it provides pizza delivery. It actually last mile delivery bot. So they're live in Houston. So in Houston, if you order pizza from Domino's, there'll actually be a self-driven robot that will come to your house, and you'll get a notification on your mobile. You go down, you enter your OTP, and then the car automatically opens and you get pizza directly from the oven itself. So very, very cool thing that they are doing. We landed that account at a mere 20, 25, $30,000. Fast forward 3 years, we ended up expanding almost about 50x in that account. And the only reason we did that is, like, for in our case, like, we didn't know, like, the whole concept was like, we didn't know. uh, we knew that machine learning is going to become extremely critical, but we didn't know who are going to be the winners. So the whole idea was like, whosoever is going to grow, we are going to grow like 50x, 100x with them. So and that is true for all ML native companies such as you guys. Like, as you kind of sell into one particular unit or one particular use case of that particular org, if you're able to provide great experience, great customer retention, great customer delight, you'll be able to grow a lot more faster in those accounts. And this is what sets you up for formidable scaling, and also helps you prove whether there is like real product market fit or not. Second, how do you direct, like, now that we've made that point clear that why it is important, let's understand some of the things that you can look at and quantitatively define metrics that will direct your team to pursue those values. So you need to be able to figure out a way to measure and optimize the time to value for the customer. So after they use your product or service or solution, what sort of business impact are they able to create, and is what is the time in which they are able to create impact. And as you think about your product roadmap, this becomes a central theme that you would want to derive or drive um, uh, within your customers. They should be able to create You should be able to create a much bigger impact in their business, and you should be able to do it faster and faster. So this is one of the big ways through which you can that leads to high customer retention, leading to much stronger NRR, and hence much easier and efficient scaling. Third, I think one of the overlooked factor is, like, people often focus on building just the product and letting customer figure out how they want to use it and charter their own journey. But I believe, like, customer service can be a very big differentiator, and time and again it has been proven on how um, uh, customer service can actually be used to be able to differentiate yourself amongst your customers. So one of the things that we did at Playment was we actually had customer success manager, like we used to call them engagement managers. And the job of engagement managers was to like, apart from growing the business, apart from NPS, etc., like subjectively figure out if if cu- if customers are happy working with us or not. Just sheer delight. And on a normal day, like, it does not make that much of a difference. But let's say, being a startup, there will, more often than not, you will end up hitting points where either your system is down, or you are missed a deadline, or you are not able to provide high quality output, your model accuracy is not that great, or you've not got the right data, etc. Like, there can be hundreds of things where you might not be able to meet the promise that you had made to your customer. And that is where this engagement, this service becomes extremely important, because that is where you can actually be transparent and have a conversation with them, and just saying, hey, listen, we know that we screwed up, and here are the reason why we screwed up, but this is what we are going to do to make sure that we get back on track. And because you've been able to build that relationship with the customer, I think your customers will often overlook a small minor dip in the value that you in the SLAs today, because they like working with you, and it's as simple as that. And this is what leads to the most powerful form of marketing, which is word of mouth. Fourth, I think I often see founders often uh, think that, if we are able to provide the cheapest solution to the customers, we'll be able to sell. In certain cases that might be true, but again, in my experience, enterprises don't want to buy the cheapest product. What they want is, they have a business problem that they want to solve, and they want to buy products that are going to make them successful. So they are, like, in such an early stage, like, more often than not, you will not be having a sophisticated product and optimized flow. Your model will not work in all sorts of scenarios. But you know what, that doesn't matter. And and even if you give a 20% discount, it is not going to be a material difference to the overall bottom line of of your customer. What they are going to do, especially for ML native companies, and especially if you're targeting enterprises, they are going to assess that how much they like working with you, how much how much they like your product and service. And that becomes a very crucial thing. Imagine you're trying to sell to a company like, I don't know, a company like Philips will not have like the best ML talent, and they are not going to be able to create the most sophisticated models. They are going to look out for teams that are going to help them achieve that journey. And more often than not, there will be VPs who will probably be a decision maker. They'll have budget, they'll have data, and but and they want to get to outcomes. Now they are going to take bets internally and externally. So you have to make sure that you position yourself, you position your product in such a way that adds the most amount of value, and hence price will automatically become secondary. uh, because you need to understand, right? Like, no VP ever ever got fired to buy Salesforce or a ServiceNow or an IBM. Those are established brands. Now, what you need to do is position yourself in such a way that whatever, and make it easy for them to take a bet on you, and they will be ready to pay. Because you know what, companies like Microsoft or Salesforce or ServiceNow are already pricing their product at premium. So whatever you're going to price is not going to be a differentiator. I'm not saying always, but what I'm trying to say is, like, you, in your early stages, you have to figure out the right value that you provide to the end customer, and you will be able to charge that. So never fear to ask more. The worst case that is going to happen is they just say that we're not going to do it. So it's okay to discount, that's fine, but you need to position yourself that this is what the value we are going to provide, and this is what the pricing looks like. One question that I often get is, what is the right way to think about pricing strategy? And in my limited experience, I don't think there is any rocket science here. I think there's only experimentation that works, and which is why I often suggest that you start on a higher price, and figure out on where it goes. So you have to kind of uh, hear what customers are saying, understand if they're not ready to buy at this particular pricing, then at what price they're going to buy, and why are they saying those kind of stuff. But I would encourage you guys to think, as you think about your pricing strategy, often come up with a strategy through which you are able to grow the spend that customer is going to make with on you as they grow, or as they consume more and more service. So usage based models are definitely a lot more valuable. Usage based pricing models are a lot more valuable than, let's say, per seating, per person per month kind of pricing, because it just grows with the customer. But again, it can be different for different companies. But that's something that I would encourage you guys to think about. The last pitfall, I think, founders often end up kind of competing on how big their team has become. I think it doesn't matter until unless you have reached product market fit, because the only thing that matters pre PMF is a point number one: dreaming, building, and selling. Any time that is spent on team management will end up becoming distraction. Because, to be honest, if you have not nailed your product market fit, you will end up spending a lot of time and energy in figuring out and managing teams and setting up processes. Those are important, but not that important till you actually hit product market fit. And that is why your topmost, my advice would be that your topmost priority be figuring out the product market fit before scaling up your team. um, so, and let's say it's possible that you may have let's say raised uh, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or maybe like $1-2 million, still seed stage, early stage. You have money to be able to build out a team. What I would suggest is, like, let's say if you end up running on a bandwidth crunch, or want to kind of add maybe one or two salesperson, or maybe, like, few engineers, few designers, to be able to kind of iterate on first version of product, and do some market research, do some ops, etc. uh, I would say, like, hire people who are really, really hungry for success, people who have raw IQs. One of the things that we tried to do at Playment was try and hire underdogs, more generalists, not experts, but generalists who really want to go out and prove themselves. So that kind of aligns with your own hunger and your own want to be able to prove something to the world, and build something that kind of changes the world for the good. So having people on your team who also think that way will just, like, make the team management a lot more easier, make the work a lot more efficient, and you can get a lot more done, rather than, let's say, hiring someone from a Google, or a Flipkart, or an Amazon, and things like that, where they would have set practices, best practices. In early stage, it doesn't matter. Do things, YC always says, do things that don't scale. So this is something that is going to be extremely important, um, as you kind of embark on your PMF journey. One last point I'll try to make is, I often see that, people who are building, let's say, thinking about expanding into US or international geographies, and maybe have started with India. How to do that is like a topic on its own, and can we can cover that sometime later. But a mistake that I see founders end up making is, they think that they're just going to hire one salesperson in US, and that will help unlock that geography. Well, it just doesn't work that way. Definitely there are a lot more nuances uh, on its own geography. Like, buyer people who, like, the way US buys versus the way Europe buys versus the way Indians buy are totally different. And as a founder, you need to understand those nuances yourself. You need to go through that redefining of PMF, like redefining cycle of PMF itself, and figure out what is the right value proposition that kind of works. So just hiring one or two salespeople is not going to solve the problem. It may help you close one or two deals here and there, may get you some early traction, but this is not foundational on how you are going to grow from X to 10x, and things thereof. So these are some of the pitfalls that I wanted to cover. Before I go on to next segment on acquisition, I'll probably just pause if there are any comments or questions on any of these pointers, and before we move on to the next segment.
Chani here from Reflection AI. Thanks, Ayush. Thanks, Siddharth. Not a question per se, but a comment. I think I totally agree with what you're saying because we've also built our company on, a lot of people hungry to learn and build things and be updated with what they are doing. Than, like you said, don't hire for brand because we've seen typically when they come with a lot of baggage, the learning process is more difficult. So I agree. What we have built within our team as well, right, has come from people who are early stage employees who have taken up a lot. Right now, we've obviously got uh, a lot of mentoring from these startup cohorts and you know uh, the big techs helping us out. But yeah, I agree. Not having anyone on board as just for the sake of brand does help. People who have been part of our organization and built the product and own the product have stayed. I think that helps for the others as well. It's a great retention policy because they own it basically. They build it, they own it. I also have another point: hiring international sales. So yeah, we are actually in our GTM mode, and Ayush knows that's the only thing I keep pestering him for. What is your view on like now that we start selling out internationally, and you say that people should like could be local, right? Like we could hire people here for GTM internationally, or like something more on this if you could like highlight. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that I'm not opposed to hiring international salespeople. What I was trying to get the point across was for at least initial let's say 3 or 4 or 5 customers. I think as a founder, one should try and do sales themselves just to kind of understand what differences they or what sort of objections they are going to get as they move from, let's say, if you're selling in India today, and then taking your product to US, like what sort of questions do you get? What sort of objections do you get? So that you are able to create those objection handling things. And
Absolutely.
one of the ways to do that is probably have, let's say, maybe an SDR, sales development person based in India, and you can kind of, let's say, start with a list of maybe 50 companies that you would like to target. If you are more PLG driven company, then probably you can figure out some of the landing pages, or probably some segmentation of the customer segment that you want to target, and
Mm-hmm.
try and get some leads and set up some meetings. And
Yeah.
for that, I don't think you need international salespeople, because see, hiring, first of all, hiring in US is not easy,
Yeah.
or for any other geography. I'm just taking US as an example.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, first you have to be like, because you are not a known company, you will have to establish your brand. You will have to give a substantial equity. And like, given that you like, one doesn't have experience on hiring, more often than not, I'm not talking about you specifically, Chandni, I don't know the
Yeah,
context,
yeah, yeah, I get it. Yeah, yeah.
but more often than not, you will end up making mistake, and this is going to be a costly mistake.
Yeah.
So that is why I suggest that, we should rather uh, try and do initial sales, get some 3 4 5 customers ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can go
We'll
and hire.
probably figure out who would be a better
Correct,
next line of
correct,
like sales team
correct,
for us.
correct,
Yeah,
correct.
I agree. No, so you're
And
right.
just
Like,
one last point
yeah,
I'll make:
yeah,
never hire one person. Always
yeah.
in sales, hire 2 salespeople,
Mhm.
so that you
It's
know.
competitive as well.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
absolutely. No, I
I
agree.
just wanted
My
to add
co-founder.
to that.
Yeah.
Sid, in your experience, do you see, especially AI native companies, finding multiple PMFs, in different geographies? Having found a PMF in India and assuming we are talking about enterprise focused business, not a PLG business, did you have to establish a PMF again in mature markets, or any learnings thereof?
I think in my opinion, I think it is uh, a lot more true for ML native companies than traditional SaaS companies, I would say, because it's just like, the workflows that we are talking about, the data formats that we are talking about. Let's say you're building a simple KYC model for, let's say, banks in India. Now these are going to be based out of on Aadhaar or voter ID card or PAN card in India. Now the documents in US are going to be completely different. So your model is going to change. So I think, like, if you think that all the workflows, all the model impacting parameters are same, and you can just lift and shift your product into newer geographies, and just the difference is going to be on GTM motion, then probably you need to just figure out GTM motion. But if you think that that is not the case entirely, I think one needs to spend some time figuring out how they can customize their product for that particular geography. And I think that happens more in ML native companies than in traditional SaaS software companies. For us, the biggest differentiator was like, it's just that US is a lot more developed market than India. Then the needs of the customers were far more advanced than what we had anticipated. So we actually spent almost about a year's time to be able to ready our product before we can go full steam in the US.
Uh, Hi, Sid. This is Ayush here from Aura ML. I had a question about selecting the first niche or vertical that to get into, because like in your case as well, you could have annotated data for like multiple different industries, right? So how did you yourself like figure out, or how did you approach this basically?
Yeah, very good question, Ayush. I think it's a very important thing, and I would encourage founders to spend a lot more time deliberating about it. Glad that you asked. I'll just share quick insight on how we did it for at Payment. So we had actually built some platform that were able to support images. So we knew that we wanted to target in computer and wanted to kind of focus on computer vision. But this was back in 2017 when computer vision was still like, taking up, and a lot more companies were getting funded. So we saw different verticals where the need of annotated data is going to be extremely high, and um, and in these segments, um, the maturity of in-house tooling wasn't that great. So we found out that for us, the beachhead that we selected was self-driving cars, because of a simple reason that, if you get, let's say, 1 in 10,000 Google searches incorrect, it does not matter. But if you get like 1 in 10,000 predictions that car make wrong, then basically the cost is life. So we figured out that the sheer amount of data that is required for these companies is extremely high, and most of these companies are relatively, they've raised a lot amount of funding. So there is like a big need to be able to move a lot more faster. So the need is today, the need is now, and the need is a lot. So I think these were some of the questions that we got positive answer to, that led us to kind of double click on autonomous driving as a beachhead. But the meta thing that I'm trying to communicate is, for you need to figure out in which particular industry is most ripe for disruption, and already has a designated budget or market that you can pursue, and there is less competition around that, so that you can make faster inroads. So we were lucky to be able to stumble upon autonomous driving, and that has really helped us to kind of uh, grow steadily in the broader market.
Another like follow-up question to that. So once you have decided your initial market and you have like some traction, so for example, in your case, the labelers would be like trained on like annotating data for like cars and all of that. But now you find out that like medical, for example, is very useful. So how would you like accommodate the cost of like, or like the effort needed to go from one vertical to the other, or do you just stick to one vertical and go with that, or how do you decide on that?
So I think there, the one of the frameworks that we typically use is like, there are two ways to expand. Either you can expand vertically or you expand horizontally. So I think you need to make a choice for your own company on which direction you want to take. um, I would say that it is a combination of two things. One is, where is market pushing you towards, and second is, what is your capability to be able to build that. Do not build something that is extremely orthogonal to what you have today, because you lose all the advantage that you had, all the ground that you had covered in your first journey of finding PMF and getting some of the initial customer. So I would say, like, try and look for adjacencies, and also look for what your customers are going to say. The idea is to be able to grow incrementally and grow faster. So it made, like, every million that you grow should take you less time than what it was taking you a million earlier, is a good way to think about it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cool. I think in interest of time, I'll just quickly jump ahead and cover a little bit about acquisition. Um, I think there are just 3 slides there. I think the first biggest point, and like all you guys have just started out, so not that you guys should actively think about it, but I think in general this is a less talked about topic. And every like the goal of an enterprise is to be able to create value for all its shareholders, including founders and investors. uh, 80% of the value is created via exits. That's what stats says. 20% end up making to 20% of value is created by the companies which end up becoming going public. And obviously those are like massive companies, generational companies. Everyone aspires to do that. But at the same time, one of the things that you guys should think about or deliberate is like knowing when should you sell your startup, or when should you start thinking about exits, etc. I think there are 3 things that I could come up with, and it's not an exhaustive list, but I think this kind of gives a framework to kind of think about it. First, when you think that you don't have enough shots at success, like the idea, like you can't, like you can't, especially in an ML native company, which where R&D is like R&D expenses are extremely high. Or if you're a VC backed company, the the growth journey that you are embarking on is extremely rapid. So you can't afford to have too many bad quarters, honestly. So you need to understand that how many shots or how many bad quarters can you afford. So you shouldn't be running like wait to run out of the money. So don't wait to stress sell, because that often leads to poor outcomes. Instead, just keep calibrating on what is the timeline that you have, and what are the exit options that you have, and figure out how to approach that. Second, when you think that you can't win alone, at least like, especially in pre-traction phase, where let's say revenues are less than couple of millions of dollars, plus and minus few percentage points here and there. When you know or you feel that you can't win alone, and what are the probable reasons? Probably uh, you're not in the right market, you do not have the right team, you do not have the right access to customers. All of these are solvable problems. I'm not saying that these problems can't be solved, but you have a strong intuition. And this is where you have to, like, kind of weigh your intuition versus your aggression on, and deliberate like whether or not you can win alone or not. And lastly, and I'll talk about how we thought about at Playment later. And the third is, when offer is too big to refuse. Everyone has a magic number. It could be relative. For some people it could be multiple millions of billions of dollars. For some people it could be multiple millions of dollars. You should know what is yours, and you should figure out if there's an offer on the table which is like a win-win for all shareholders. How should you think about it? And knowing what it would look like is a good way to kind of take the decision when it comes to that. At Playment, I think it was a combination of these 3. A little bit of background about ourselves. So I think this was just pre-COVID. We had put together a term sheet just before COVID in March 2020, and we ended up because of COVID, the we like the term sheet was not no longer available. And that is where there it came to a point where we did not have enough shots of success. So first approach for us at Playment was like, I think, to increase our shots at success. That is the first thing that you should do. One of the things that we did when there was no capital available outside and we just have like couple of months of runway available left with us, we went back to our customers. We were able to actually get customers to pay advance $1 million. That actually helped us elongate our runway, and that only happened because we had actually focused a lot on customer retention and customer success and things like that. But while we were doing that, I think we quickly hit a point where the entire world was shut down, and we couldn't, like, travel to US. Our primary market was US. So we figured out like it is very difficult for us to win alone, and a lot of customers that we are trying to talk to were actually, and that is where like TELUS International actually came to us with a strategic funding investment discussion. But we quickly figured out like a lot of customers that they were targeting or they already had were all the customers that we wanted to target, and one thing led to another, and it just became strategic investment turned into um, full-blown acquisition, and we actually thought that it is a win-win for all shareholders, and we pursued that. In interest of time, I'm not going to cover more, but I'm more than happy to kind of chat if you guys want to discuss that offline as well. But I'll quickly cover one particular thing that I think is extremely important, and I read this in Saster blog. How does liquidity options vary in terms as kind of as you move across your startup journey? So when you are in your early days, you can become like extremely hot um, companies which everyone is talking about, and you have come up with this next big idea. You have got some initial customers to kind of prove that as well. You have a very different innovative approach towards market, a new unique product solution, or maybe unique go to market strategy, etc. So you may end up becoming extremely hot in your early stages, and that is where your first local maxima arises. So if you get, like, let's say at $1 million, a $50 million offer, I think it's worth considering. Whether you take it up or not is something that you can everyone can evaluate themselves. But 50x multiple on like real liquidity option, that is something that is definitely worth contemplating. And then comes, let's say you turn that down, but as you kind of move from your seed stage to, let's say, series A, series B stage, you fall into this MRR, or let's say ARR multiple trap, which is you have to do all the effort on growing from 1 million to 10 million. You are no longer a business which is just valued on the product or initial strategy that you had, but you actually have to prove that out. You have to build that business. You have to get more and more customers. You have to scale it to a certain level, a respectable amount, that will again lead you to a place where you become lucrative enough. And that is where a typical thing is about $10 million, which is where a lot of 100 million to 200 million, $300 million acquisition typically take place. So that is something which again brings you to a local maxima. And if you are at $10 million and you're getting a $200 million offer, I think you should definitely evaluate that. And then once you say no to that, I think you reach to a stage where very few companies can actually spend $500 million or plus to be able to acquire you, and which is where the VC overhang plays. So you have to, at that point in time, if you're saying no to that, you have to play out the longer game and take your company to the IPO and build a substantial amount of business where you can think about liquidity option. Again, these are like frameworks to think about it. Nothing is certain. M&A is like probably the most uncertain thing, or anecdotal examples that can happen. But this is like a good way to think about it based on different offers, different acquisition that has happened over last few years. Now, I think I'll just like very briefly touch upon like what sort of acquisition happens. But before that, like I think there's a common saying, and I think it's very, very true, which is like best companies are bought and not sold. I think it is extremely true. There is no way WhatsApp could be acquired for $19 billion had they gone out to sell themselves, or Figma would have acquired for $20 billion by Adobe recently, which is like almost at 50x multiple when the entire public market is trading at 10x, 12x. Had they gone out and run like a complete process. But I do think that you can position yourself as your company as an attractive target. And to Ayush's point earlier, I think ML native companies are very, very uniquely positioned to be able to do that, because all large enterprises do not have strong talent, do not have know-how to be actually able to build meaningful, substantial, sophisticated models and solutions that will actually help drive business outcomes for them. So I think talking to like knowing what probable top public and private companies in your space could acquire you, your direct and indirect competitors, would be helpful. I recently read about Figma, where it says that Dylan, who is founder of Figma, first spoke to Adobe CEO in back in 2012 when he was founding. So this is something that you should actively think about in general, not something that should come in your dreaming, building, and selling process. But once in a while, important to kind of think about. Yeah.
I completely second Sid. I have been an ex-investor. We work closely with VCs. See, at the end of the day, all of you, I mean, I think, I don't remember the stats, but more than 50% plus companies in the cohort have raised some capital, right? Either 500,000 or less than 1 million. So all of you are, at the end of the day, your VCs would be expecting return, and acquisition is a good way to give returns, especially in this domain. And of course, the listing and IPO sounds very glamorous, but it also comes with a lot of other aspects that maybe founders are not best cut out for: compliance, localization, localization compliances and whatnot, and especially listing outside the country, and so on and so forth. And I love the fact that Sid said one line, that acquisition is a very less talked about concept. Everybody wants to go big and perhaps go list, but if you look at in the last 50 years of tech software products, a lot of companies have got good acquisitions by large tech companies, and therefore made themselves happy, their investors happy, their employees happy, everybody, all stakeholders, and their customers happy. So yeah, that's just how I wanted to add.
Yeah. And just to your point, I was like, Amazon, Microsoft, Google make like 50 plus acquisition every year. And these are not small acquisitions. These are like very pretty decently sized acquisitions. So yeah, I totally second that. And again, not to discourage anyone on going that journey of taking your companies to IPO. I think that is phenomenal. And you should just be prepared to do that grind work and what it takes. That's the dream. That's the dream on all of us have started. But I just wanted to kind of talk about that. There is an alternate path as well if opportunity present yourself, and you need to keep creating. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, your job is to create opportunities out of thin. You did that by raising your first capital. You did that by hiring your first employee. You did that by getting your first customer. You're going to do it time and again. This is just part of the game. So just be cognizant of that. I'll just talk about, let's say, there are just three broad kinds of acquisition that I think we could categorize on. One is where companies acquire for end-to-end business, which is primarily happens at late stage. Companies are evaluating inorganic growth strategy, typically 500 million plus. good examples would be Twilio acquired SendGrid to be able to grow faster. Adobe acquired Figma to be able to get into collaborative cloud design, etc. So Microsoft acquired LinkedIn. So time and again these things happen, but again this is where the business is completely formed and is generating either high growth or or a reasonable amount of cash flows, etc. It can be different uh, uh, needs, but typically happens at late stage. Things that are probably more relevant for this conversation is product and talent based hiring. I think product is something that we should focus on, which is more early stage. Either companies acquire for like revenue or cost optimization. Revenue could be driven by feature gap, or cost optimization is where if you are solving a very critical problem where which they can kind of, let's say, deploy all across. Let's say for example you are building a computer vision based model to help detect quality or do QA for in manufacturing. Let's say now Ford might be interested, or let's say Continental might be interested and might want to deploy this across all their factories across the world. So that might be an interesting cost optimization take. Feature could be which is, let's say, very recent Indian example is when Stripe acquired Reco to be able to build invoice reconciliation. It was relatively early stage acquisition, but the impact that Reco, when kind of coming under the broader view of Stripe, they would be able to kind of grow globally and be taken to, let's say, hundreds of millions of customers that Stripe has. And lastly, it's more around talent. This is more kind of acqui hire, I would say, where companies don't want to take the product, but just you have built a strong team and they're interested in hiring the team itself. Mostly valuation is done per engineering members or per member of team. So I think these are the three things. In early stage, product based acquisition primarily leads to most amount of value creation, and that is something that you guys can keep in mind. No
Hey,
question.
Sid, Sam here. I just want to ask, like, what is like a good time? Like, I know you said that we'll have to get bought and all that, but what is a good time to think if things don't go well, etc., for a we hire or any sort of an acquisition, right? Like, do you pursue at all? If yes, then what is the scenario that you look at? And I don't know how, etc. So
So are you saying like what is a good time to start thinking about exit?
yeah.
I think I think good time is today itself. Like you should always have some sort of exit scenario in your mind, but obviously frequency of that thought matters as and when situation happens. So it need not be P0 item that you are thinking today, but let's say you recognize that you don't have enough runway to take, let's say, two bad quarters. That is where I think you should start thinking about it. And when I say start thinking about it, I think what you need to do is you need to kind of position yourself as an attractive target. And there are a number of things that you can do. You can figure out, like, what sort of companies might be interested to buy, or what sort of companies where you think you can add most amount of value, and try and create those relationships. It's a long process. Exits are hard. There are people involved, there is money involved, there is due diligence involved, and there are so many things that are involved. So I think building those relationships and positioning yourself as an attractive target is something that becomes something that you should think about if you especially if you do not have you cannot afford two bad quarters.
With that, thank you, Sid, for an amazing session. I think this was required, and I think uh, many of the AI first companies will eventually get sold. or bought, as you rightly said, not sold. They will get bought. So thanks again for this.
Thanks, Ayush. Thanks, everyone. All the very best. You guys are on building something great. So just kick asses.